Yes, we primarily provide funding for capacity building projects in countries or, supporting both state and non-state actors, including the civil society and private sector. Normally what we do is we solicit for proposals from people who want to promote capacity development, whether it's in terms of doing some training or strengthening the educational sector, or building some institutions, because we also pay attention to institutional capacity development as well. And so we do, that's one way that we do that. The second way is for us to try to support capacity building directly. For example, working with the African Union, including the reforms that are going on now, supporting the RECs, supporting parliaments directly by building the capacity of those parliaments to do their job very well, or establishing think tanks, which we have established more than 45 across the continent, including the one here in Rwanda, which is the Institute for Policy Analysis and Research, IPA Rwanda.
Are there some areas of focus you have in specific, like we're doing this in infrastructure or this or this? Yes,
when we began, the major issue that was facing the continent at the time was lack of skills and expertise in policy formulation and policy implementation, and economic policy mostly. So this is why our focus began by training what we call economic policy managers. And these are the people you see today as ministers of finance, or central bank governors, and their experts who work with them. In Ghana alone, I went to the Ministry of Finance and realized that about 40 staff members who have been there were all beneficiaries of ACBF capacity development program. So we have also some programs that are established in some universities servicing the various regions of the continent. So this is where we have started, but we have expanded since then to go beyond just the economic policy analysis. Yeah. And we are involved in fact, empowering women in agriculture. We are now working with the Gates Foundation to provide support for tobacco control. We are also working with Afrexim Bank, for example, to promote trade, capacity for inter-Africa trade. So the our area of operation has expanded significantly.
Now, this is a timely conversation, of course, yeah. Very key to Africa's development. At a time where we're integrating, having a market of 2 billion people, we still have this huge skills gap. In the 26 years, what are some of the low-hanging fruits that we can point out?
No, I think the low-hanging fruit is obviously to strengthen state capacity, because that's, the governments are very important, no matter what anybody says. If you don't have the correct bureaucracy and skilled people in government working at the civil servants, then it will be difficult for things to be implemented. So that is very important. For us, we pay attention to public administration because of that. That's a low-hanging fruit. Second one is to begin to pay attention to the critical technical skills, because you cannot talk about Africa's transformation without thinking about the skills you have in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, because institutions are already doing that. The only thing now is to ensure that the programs that they are providing are programs that are needed, and they're training people where the needs are, that is responding to the needs of the marketplace, and also thinking about how to encourage women, young women, to be able to get into these fields where they are severely underrepresented.
We still have a very huge informal sector, about 70%. How are you reaching out to this particular population? Informal
sector is very, very huge in many countries. There's a country where the estimate is up to 75%. And so what we do is there are 2 or 3 ways that we support. One is to encourage studies and analysis of the informal sector to understand the best policy options for dealing with them. Secondly is also to help the governments, because ultimately they are the ones who are going to really begin to do, whether it's formalization or provide the sort of services that are needed. So we definitely help them to establish programs to to improve the conditions of work in the informal sector and to promote formalization as well. But thirdly, what we also do is at the continental level, for example, we work together with the African Union. And ACBF is now a specialized agency of the African Union, in charge of capacity development in the continent. So we work with that to bring together all the stakeholders who are involved in working with the improvement of conditions for the informal sector, for them to be able to share experiences and share knowledge and be able to learn from each other.
Actually, I wanted to add on the fact that you mentioned you just became a special agency for the African Union. I cannot let you go away without talking the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. This could be one of the challenges people will say that, okay, we're creating these huge markets, but how do we have enough skills, or do we have, you know, enough research or anything to be able to move ahead with this kind of agenda? How, in just your own perspective, more than just signing the agreements, let's look at the implementation plan. Give me an idea of, do you think this is something that can actually be put off?
This is a big deal. It's probably the biggest deal that has happened in the 21st century for Africa.
In terms of signing, or in terms of...
Well, in terms of the agreement itself, the initiative of having a continental free trade area, imagine what that represents. You know, we are talking about if all the 55 African countries were to be adherent, this is a huge market.
What are the chances of achieving a 50% implementation of that agreement?
Well, I think let's step by step.
Yes.
The first thing is, this is a huge market, as I mentioned. Estimates of GDP of this space is $3.4 trillion. You know, it will really be something that's huge. But currently, you remember in March, the summit here in Kigali was where the agreement was launched. And since then, we have had 49 African countries sign up, which is extremely encouraging. But the unfortunate thing is moving from signing to ratification is not moving as fast. So currently we have about 6 countries that have ratified, but they need 22 countries to ratify before it can come into effect. Yeah. So admittedly, I am concerned, and this is why I'm urging African countries to really ramp up this ratification process and everybody to join in the campaign. Because the record is not very good.
When you come out to say you're concerned, someone would say, oh, so we're not sure.
No, I'm concerned at the rate of ratification, because this has to happen faster than
at the rate
it has
of
been
commitment.
Happening. Exactly. But once you ratify, the implementation will be a major issue. And we have now started engaging countries, ACBF started engaging countries to do what we call readiness assessment. You know, to see how ready are you to start implementing or start benefiting from the African Continental Free Trade Area. So we'll do that assessment, and that will help us to develop some strategic, capacity needs assessment and the strategies for addressing those capacity gaps that we will, observe. Whether they are human capacity, critical skills, or institutions that are necessary for countries to benefit from this free trade agreement. But I'm hopeful that the efforts that are being put in place will really push the ratification.
What are some of the key issues that you think need to be addressed for this to actually take off?
Like I said, number one is to ensure that you get adequate ratification as soon as possible. Number two is to do this assessment for specific countries to understand how ready they are, whether they have the state capacity and they have the private sector, because that's what's going to drive it, that is capable of really taking advantage of this huge market area of over 1 billion people, and also to establish the secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area at the continental level, at the African Union. And each country should also have that kind of mechanism that